So let's start with Chris, because I see Chris first on the list. So Chris, can you please introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Sorry about that, guys. So my name is Chris. I'm from Point Pleasant, New Jersey. I recently met Michael through LinkedIn audio rooms. I'm basically a rising medtech thought leader here in America. I have always had natural talents. I've been described as a polymath. I'm currently enrolled in a global leadership program at MIT that actually starts tomorrow. And I took a course at MIT a couple months back in April for introductions to artificial intelligence for business strategy and implications. And I studied under Professor Thomas Malone there. Since then, I've made connections here in America with the Department of Defense, the IEEE members at MIT, as well as Harvard Medicine, and a number of people heavily involved in cancer research here in America. So I am involved in launching a 501c3 nonprofit here in America, where I'm one of the focuses that we have is going to be on what's wrong with AI, in terms of how it's just a mimic machine, and not true intelligence, and how dangerous that is for the world, and what the bots are doing on the internet in magnifying division. Basically authoritarian countries who are magnifying division and causing us all to fight with one another rather than progress and work forward on solutions to fight climate change and stuff like that. So I connected with Michael recently, and we met up and clicked right away. So that's my briefest introduction I can give you as to why I think I'm here. But it's nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you for being here, and I think it's important to have as many industries as possible represented, right? And because that's part of the diversity, is different industries as well. So, James, you're next up on the circle that I'm going in. Whether it's backwards or forwards, I don't know, but it's a circle.
Hey, hi everybody doing? My name is James Bumpus. I am a CEO of Bumpus Technical Services. The company that I'm currently leading, I've been in business for 4 years. I lead executive coaching, leadership development, and professional speaking. Been in industry for IT for just over 30 years, Navy veteran, and been in project management for over 20. But I, to Chris's point, great kickoff, Chris. AI, one of the things from an AI perspective, I just partnered with a pediatric doctor to take a look at the biases in the medical industry. We created an app, and I just kicked off a Shark Tank type environment in Orlando with AI Med to pitch this app to help patients find culturally competent doctors in the industry so that they can be comfortable and trust the medical industry, as well as on the other side as doctors being treated objectively instead of subjectively, because they were also struggling with not being evaluated from their content, being evaluated by their container. So to your point, it's been very interesting to see AI and the biases put in by the AI creators, and also to see DEI in this space and to be a part of this panel. So I want to thank the organization for bringing us all together, to Dr. Joseph's point, Michael's point, and Chris's point, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I really appreciate that. And Zen, if you could make your introduction a little bit longer, maybe it'll be enough time for Rob to get back. So, feel free to drag it out a little bit longer if you choose to. If not, I am humorous enough that I can definitely absorb time. We're good.
I'm glad you stayed there, Michael, because I'm usually the long-winded one.
I'm a solo parent of 3 kids, so if humor's not involved in my life,
go ahead, Zen.
I don't know what is. So, Zen, it's on you, my friend.
All right. Okay, can everyone hear me? I think my mic is unmuted.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Joseph, for having me on this panel. I really appreciate you. A big thanks to all the distinguished panelists. It's an honor and a privilege to share a stage with all of you as well. My name is Zen, and I've been in the space of product development, build as a service for about 20 plus years. award-winning product developer, multi-industry award-winning product developer, LinkedIn top web design voice, certified PMP, digital marketing expert. I started an organization after scaling. Scaled some of the fastest growing businesses in North America using those competencies according to Inc. 5000. But in 2021, we made a strong pivot and launched an organization called Benevel that I founded. And we are a tech digital solutions agency that focuses on amplifying the impact of mission focused organizations and leaders, the champions of change. So taking all of those competencies that we've honed in the private sector and really trying to wield them along the side the champions of change, people that are trying to do good out in the world, and do just that. And so we've been doing that for the past about 3-4 years now, and we're getting good traction. One of the key areas that we really focus on is we're pretty philanthropic in the competencies that we offer to the champions of change, to the do good sector. And so if there are resource gaps in project management, executive leadership, we can come in fractionally. But in some cases, we donate that as well, too. One of the organizations that we donate competencies to is called AREL. Big shout out to AREL. They are a community building organization. Dr. Joseph, you know this quite well, in Kakuma, Kakuma Refugee Camp, Kenya. And we provide all sorts of technical infrastructure to the refugees in that camp environment so that they can further their learning journeys. The AREL provides digital training courses in a lot of the technical areas that we're familiar with. So from software engineering to data analytics to cybersecurity to web development, front end, back end, full stack. They provide digital training courses to those refugees. But one of the challenges is obviously continuing that learning journey. If you can teach someone to code, but then you pack up your laptop and leave, they can't continue their learning journey. So we provide the technical infrastructure to them. We provide databases, server spaces, subdomains, software subscriptions so that they can continue their learning in the tech hub there as well. I also do guest instruction there as well, so teaching a lot of those courses, and I provide provide consultation to them, which kind of overlaps everything I do there as a director of project management there. So in addition to our 9-to-5 and generating revenue through client work, we're pretty philanthropic in what we do with our expertise beyond that, because frankly, people need to find other ways to get access to expertise. And sometimes that can be hard to afford. And so we think about that too. So that's a long-winded, I don't know if that was long-winded enough for you, but that's a bit of a mouthful about myself.
Well, Zen, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Honored to have you here. And it was long-winded enough to get Priscilla to join. So with the tech battle that we're having. So I would like to invite Priscilla to share a little bit and introduce herself, and then from there we will move into Rob or the discussion, and Rob will join as soon as he's able to. Priscilla, can you hear? Okay, I didn't know if you could hear us.
Yep. Greetings, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that we figured out the link. My name is Priscilla Williams. I am here from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here under People Behind Policies, which is like my own, not even a nonprofit. It was an idea that I came with after navigating homelessness. And the goal is to bring people to the forefront of policymaking and ensure that we're balancing people, policies, profits, and priorities. Through People Behind Policies, I endeavored to create some sort of chatbot. So with the proliferation of AI and with the Chat GPT revolution and Gemini's emergence, I really was thoughtful about how do we bridge the gap for individuals to be part of the asset allocation, the program design, and the purpose of AI integration, considering that there is a digital divide. So if we don't have access to internet, we don't have access to infrastructure, how can we be programmers and change makers? And then I really went on a journey of trying to use it personally. How can I leverage AI in my pro se legal challenges? How do I leverage AI in my entrepreneurial endeavors? So it's a continuous journey and always being cognizant of who is who are on the margins, where are the fringes, and where are the gaps. And so I don't have all the answers, but I'm definitely dedicated to the discourse. And so I'm happy to join everyone here today.
Thank you, Priscilla. Honored for you to be here and great to meet you. So we'll just start getting into it. As much as I can be long-winded and really dive into stuff that's not relevant, I have no interest in doing so today. My number one concern, well, okay, so let me do an introduction. My name is Michael Paterano. I'm a part of SDIG because I believe in their purpose and their mission. And my core belief within my mission within their mission is to make the world understand how crucial inclusion is in the DEI structure. And for me, inclusion is impossible when there's biases involved. So it's helping people to understand that once you become aware of a bias, you have a choice to either ignore it and bury it or heal it and grow through it. So the work that my company is focused on and what I primarily do with my organization is help people to heal biases, heal from their trauma and all those different things to be able to evolve into more unconditional, compassionately self-aware human beings, so that they can reflect that to the outward world. Because if there's enough of us reflecting that to the outward world, the world will magically change on its own with very little effort. Now, the question is, how many does that take? And more than we have today is the answer. But as long as there's people on that mission, as long as there's people carrying that forward, then we're making progress in that direction. Nothing happens overnight. It took us generations to get here. It's going to take us generations to go back, right? Nothing's instantaneous. There is no Staples easy button. We can claim there is, but there isn't. So one of the reasons I wanted this roundtable to come together is because to me, this is the most dangerous thing about AI is the biases that are getting built into it. We are on the ground floor of the next generation of technology for this, for humanity, right? For the human civilization. And if we build it on biases, it will amplify the biases at a rapid rate. So I believe we have to be very cognizant and aware of how we are building these foundational principles. And that is the reason that I wanted to really lead with this premise in this first talk that we're doing, as we're going to continue to do more into the new year. So what I'm going to do is start out with a few questions. Well, I'll continue questions, and we'll go around the room in whatever circle, however that works. We can. I don't know if there's a hand raising. Yeah, raise hands between the six of you, the five of us, six of us, however many there are. Whoever wants to speak first. But I think the first conversation is, how has DEI impacted your life, your work, and what you do?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very non-diverse area. Just where I grew up in North Jersey, I grew up in a white picket fence suburban town, population WASP, essentially. And it was a big shocker for me, even though I lived right next to New York City, to venture outside of that town past the age of 15, 16 years old, once I started getting in cars with my buddies and stuff like that, and got introduced to a whole lot of new perspectives. And when I went to school, and I was an athlete in school when I first got there. I was on the football team. And so my perspectives were instantly changed and upgraded. And I went to school in New York at Hofstra. So all I've learned through DEI, or before it was labeled DEI, just being exposed to different cultures, different ways of thinking, was just amazingly different ways of solving problems, just different ways of looking at things, and something that was always kind of unintentionally restrictive when you're unaware of it. And the more you become aware of different ways of people looking at things, and you just are open-minded to all of them, and you absorb different lessons from different people and different cultures, you kind of turn yourself into a little bit of like a supercomputer, and you can operate at a much higher level of efficiency. And then the more people you could find like that we can plug in together, we all become sort of a super mind. And so that's just kind of the way I view it. And I stole the word supermind from Thomas Malone, but I just like stealing good ideas, I guess, is the way to put it. And I think the best way to build foundations of going forward is to stop having the old conversations over and over and over again. We've had them. We know what the answers are. How do we then take actionable steps to go forward from there?
Thank you, Chris. I think that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I feel like that experiential, being experienced to the different cultures, different ways of living, different perspectives, right? Because it all comes down to perspective. Really can open our, when we're open-minded enough, we can open our minds and our hearts and our souls open to seeing from different lenses, right? And because we can never live in anybody else's shoes, I've actually recently shifted my verbiage from "I can understand what you're going through" to "I can relate to understand what you're going through." Because the reality is, I can't understand what anybody else is going through. I have no clue. Their perspective is unique to themselves. So, out of respect, I've shifted my verbiage to "I can relate to understand what you're going through." And I think it's little things like that that help ourselves to rewrite our subconscious programming so that we are more understanding, more compassionate, and more open-minded with those around us. And I really like how, the digital hand, it labels who raised it first, because I would never remember. So the fact that it says one next to Priscilla works for me. Your turn, Priscilla, you're up.
Thank you. Michael, you stole my commentary where I did think Chris's answer was brilliant, but they call me a tree shaker and a disruptor. So I intend to disrupt this discussion because on multiple levels. I think the foundational principle behind people behind policies is that as people, we have shared experiences. And despite varying perspectives, everybody wants to be able to provide for their family. Everybody wants a sense of security and safety, and everybody wants a level of agency and autonomy to be able to determine and define what their vision, their dream, and their best pathway forward. And I feel like in this space, the only way to achieve that is to ensure that all perspective and stakeholders are at the asset allocation table, because the only way that diversity, equity, and inclusion exists is through funding and financing. Because for me to be equal to you means that you believe that my capacity to understand what resources I need and how to allocate them, that you're confident in my ability to determine that, and then to articulate that to you. And then where the issue and the tensions really arise is when we have competing priorities, right? So the issue isn't there isn't enough. The issue is that we should equitably distribute resources so that we're all able to make decisions about what our future looks like and how the technology can support us through our unique and nuanced experiences. So there is a differential experience level, but there is a common ground under us being people who all need clean air to breathe, healthy, healthy environments, not to build public housing and affordable housing on asbestos lots and I'm sorry, landfills. So
Hmm.
the reason that we're experiencing this medical catastrophe that has been commoditized through commercial insurance and hospitalization is because we're prioritizing capitalism and the corporatocracy over the citizenry. And so I didn't really get to answer or introduce myself, so bear with me. I straddled the lines of poverty and privilege my entire life. So I was born in the 80s to parents who were struggling with substance abuse because, again, the government came in and flooded our streets with crack cocaine and different other areas to fragment communities and to cause dysfunction, where in which women would then rely on the government, believing that they're providing some type of support that communities of color or Black men previously provided that they were no longer able to do. So if we're going to have a discourse, we're going to discuss the externalities that led to the challenges that we're facing today. And absent of an honest dialogue, we will never achieve the sustainable development goals, which are contradictory in their design, because we have never found catalytic cooperation. We have never found consensus around how we spend money. So if we're not willing to shift the discussion, we will never achieve the goal. And there is no homogenous perspective for any community. So as a Black woman, Ayana and I don't think the same. Zen and I don't think the same. And being a woman, because there's patriarchy on top of poverty and policy and politics. So until we're going to get to the actual discussion, which will revolutionize our future, because right now, without access to internet, infrastructure, continued professional development, we will never be able to co-create. And until we co-create, we will never be able to cohabitate. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No. I mean,
Never
I'm not gonna,
apologize.
I'm
Never
not gonna cut you
apologize.
off. I promise you.
Yeah.
No, I felt that power through
Can
me.
I
So I
just
mean,
jump
I'm
in too?
stepping out of the way
Yeah. Never
I was
apologize.
gonna say, let me
if you have
step
the
in
energy
really
to.
quickly. I was gonna say sorry. I know I didn't get the chance to introduce myself. Hello, hello, hello. Please
I,
excuse my voice. I am
mm,
the executive assistant director at SDIG. James, Zen, Chris, Priscilla, aka Moms. Pleasure for you all to be here. Rob, thank you so much. I really feel honored because I'm the baby amongst all of you. Trust me, your experience. But I do want to say, I really do want to touch on it because with what she just said, it is extremely important. And as for somebody who, like she said, has straddled the poverty and the privilege, it took a lot to understand that coming from a young age, having to navigate that into my adulthood, and then understanding the intersections of my identity and what that played out to in my social interactions. Because, like she said, being a Black woman is different than being a Black man, being a white man. It is so many, there's complexities, there's intricacies that the world around you will make you feel crazy. It will make you feel like you're wrong, it will make you look at yourself, and it's very touching and impactful. So I want to touch on that. And Chris, you
mhm.
definitely did start off the conversation with a very powerful statement, so I wanted to acknowledge that. And then I'm done talking, I promise. You all can go ahead.
No worries. No promise. Hey, that's what it's about. Collaboration and communication. So I'm just going to jump in right quick there, Michael.
Go for it.
I wanted to say that first off, this has already been a treat, right? I mean, this has already evolved into what I would call a family discussion, and that's so powerful because I like the fact that we're not sit here playing on pretenses and attempting to be so posh and polished. We're actually focusing on the stuff that is near and dear to all our hearts, and so I like to show that nothing is a coincidence and pivot from an element that Chris, Priscilla talked about it, and even Ayana, and transition to what I would call the subtleties of corporate America. Like when you talk about DEI in my life, after I got out of the military, I was blessed to be able to operate in IT in leadership opportunities and roles, but DEI gave me exposure to mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship. And DEI, without mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship, no one will ever say, "Have you considered James Bumpus for this role?" And to Priscilla's point around diversity, equity, and inclusion, if they don't know you, they will never mention your name. If they're not comfortable around you, if they feel like they have no relationship with you, So all of these aspects are ways to separate us and keep us apart. And we do it sometimes ourselves. When I look at Dr. Joseph, or I look at people that I know are from the motherland, there's been a lot of disparity to keep us from even connecting and relating and working together. When I look at people, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, by the way. When I look at people right in our own neighborhood, they're looking at what set you claim, a name of a street that neither one of us even own. So there's been all kinds of things to put separation and dividers between us to make us think we're different. I just saw a beautiful post on LinkedIn that I'm sure came from TikTok, right? But it had all these beautiful babies of every complexion of the spectrum, white, black, indigenous, golden, brown, every color. And it talked about that it was only 1% difference, and that was the skin complexion. And yet we use that as a main qualifier on every job application. And we even label that as race when we're all the human race. So DEI, we got a long way to go, because what we say on that application is we will not use it to discriminate, and we use it every day to discriminate and to separate and to isolate. So this AI component, I just left a conference in Toronto, and a lot of people don't know this, but Canada was the progenitor and the creator of the modern day AI, and a lot of people don't know that. But they have identified certain countries, not the country globally, but certain organizations have identified bias in AI used for HR hiring principles that focus in on African American names, or names that are typically used by blacks, and also zip codes and gender. That if the application doesn't look like, if it says Alexis or any of the names that black people will name their children, and it's not a Mary Smith, it'll toss it out. Or if it's a gender that's not one of the typical genders like male, female, it'll toss it out. And so what this company did, and they did a white paper on it, is that they removed those criteria, because they said if we're looking for the content and the fact that this person has the skills to do the job, we don't care what their name is. We don't care what their gender is. We don't care what zip code they live in. We're going to hire them. And so they put that out there as a way to hold the industry accountable. But until I went to that conference, I didn't even know that AI was being used in that way. So I'm going to pause there and say that's how I'm seeing us staying at the front edge of AI, so that we don't use yet another tool to discriminate against us. You know what I mean? And make sure that we're holding the bias of the person programming the AI from allowing the AI itself to become the new way to hold us back.
Thank you so much, James. And I agree with you 100%. And that's one of my fears, right? My only fear around AI is that it's going to be based on the creators' biases themselves. If their biases go unchecked, then, and they're unaware of their biases, or they have no interest in being aware of their biases, because that's not something that we learn naturally. It's not something they teach in school. It's not something that they even want us, technically something that they decide is important to be aware of. So if those are the developers, then that's the foundation it's built on. It's just gonna be amplified through the technology. And as we know, technology gets faster year over year, month over month, week over week at this point. Right. So like at the rapid rate that it's expanding, if we're building this on glass foundations, then it's gonna break. And it's gonna break worse than we can ever imagine today.
Right.
Because today it's ugly because we're aware, and today it's ugly because it's human controlled. But when
Yes.
it becomes AI controlled, then how do the humans impact the AI that's already built with the biases in it? You can't go heal AI.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'll tell you
maybe you
something real
can. I just
quick
haven't
too.
figured it out.
I'll tell you this, when I was in Florida at this AI conference, they used ChatGPT to identify what are the strengths of human over AI. And they used ChatGPT to find it. And it was so illuminating. It said compassion, gut instinct, um, um, emotional intelligence, fear, sadness. It used all our emotions, and it acknowledged the power of those in business. So even ChatGPT recognizes what we bring to the table. So I just wanted to share that with you.
So I
I'm
want
so
this to
sorry.
continue in. Nope,
Go-
go ahead,
Let me-
Priscilla.
I was just gonna say to that specific point, which I'll get to later, because I
Mhm.
want to address Virginia Eubanks's automating inequality, which even brought me into this space. But the
Mhm.
first thing is, I use again, as a pro se litigant, I'm suing the Boston Housing Authority, the private landlords, the Department of Transitional Assistance for discriminatory for being legal loan sharkers of welfare benefits, because they
Mhm.
legally loan shark benefits and then have a problem when we stand up. But not only does ChatGPT and Gemini understand, are they, because I actually have discussions with the AI, which is why, again, if we are not co creating in the space, it isn't that there's a bias, there is an absence of perspectives.
Yeah.
And if we look at it as opposed to it was bias in its creation, or that it is acting in accordance with its developer's design, because we have to acknowledge that the AI was designed as a tool. And I'm not going to bring it to church, but there is an absolute spiritual element there too, because the
Mhm.
deception and the serpent are there to deceive us. And we
Mhm.
can be easily deceived when you're not in the discourse. And if
Mhm.
you're not in the development experiences,
Yes. If you're not at the
test,
table, you're right.
and more than that, we need to be part of the designing. You have to test
Yes.
drive it. You have to
Yes.
use it. You have to find a way in which that it can directly improve your life. So the
Yes.
issue isn't about, and then one more thing, I'm really sorry, because just to speak to what has been said,
Yeah.
diversity, equity, inclusion are terminology where in which the dominant culture is able to legally discriminate against you in
Yes.
policy and law and in program design. And we have to say that, because when you come and you stand up and I graduated from Suffolk University, I'm a triple ram, and completed a program at Thunderbird School of Global Management, where I found out that there is a conspiracy for us for the divide to increase, and that those who are creating these catastrophes, who are utilizing these technologies and designing them to design our futures of subservience, because that is where we're headed to. And there will no longer be any stratified classes. You are a creator, you are the bourgeoisie, or you're the proletariat. And we'll take it back to Marx, because that's the only issue. Can you create? Do you have resources? And do you have the capacity to rally others together to create something? So we have to remember what the discussion is. Once we are aware of the language and terminology that is discriminating against us, then we have to build from the ground up, because the existing systems do not have space for you or I. There is no space. And when you support me in this discussion, then you become an antagonist to the system. And that's what these social contracts, this social scoring, is to find out who's the tree shaker, who's a disruptor, who we're not going to be able to control, who's not going to be pacified into believing pandemic or polio is the next pandemic, and that Bill Gates wanted to run the vaccine distribution and bought up all of the patents to the vaccines. So we can sit here and discuss the conversations that lead us to a stalemate. Or we're going to say that the system is not working and has to be dismantled for you and I's existence. And we have to move the colonizers out. Period. You're never going to unlock and unleash Africa, and you're under colonial rule. And we live under colonial rule because we don't have any money and we don't control anything. And I'm really sorry. This is why it's like, this is a wrong conversation for me, because it's not about navigating a bias. We have to make space. And if we're not willing to make space, then we don't need to do anything. And so I thank you for listening. But the issue isn't about how do we achieve diversity and inclusion, because I'm considered grandiose. I'm black. You think too grandiose. You think you're better. No, I have endured what you're talking about and you're conceptualizing. I've lived it. And if you're not willing to bring the lived experience to the table, you're disservicing yourself. You don't have to hire me. I'm good.
Thank you, Priscilla. I love your passion and your wisdom because you by far have experiential wisdom, and I tremendous amount of respect, and I appreciate it tremendously because I don't understand that perspective, and I won't unless I sit at tables like this, right? And that's where we need to be active listeners and pay attention and being willing to hear what we don't want to hear, right? And but that's the reality. Nothing changes without it. And Zen, I want to come to you, but I want to first introduce Rob because he was able to join us. Let him introduce himself real fast, and then we'll go right back to you. All right, Zen. So Rob, feel free to please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rob Farmer. Sorry I'm late. I've had another meeting I couldn't get out of, but I'm really happy to be here, really happy to talk about this DEI topic. I come from the consumer data science and information world, and I work for the large car company Nissan, who's going through some stuff you might have read about us in the papers lately. But nevertheless, I'm a big fan of market information and consumer information and love using AI and sit on a DEI council and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Zen, if you want to continue with the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, the flow of the conversation, man. I am following up some rock stars here, and getting on stage after them is I can tell you what, I thought it would take us a good 45 minutes to get me riled up, and we're already riled up in 10 minutes into it. There's a tremendous amount of critique that I share, hearing a lot of you speak. And you can tell me, Michael, where you want me to now go. There's a flow of the conversation, and there's the initial question, and I'm happy to respond to either. So you let me know.
So there's the orchestrated part of this, which is follow the prompts and move through the questions, and then there's the me part of this, which is the never-ending rebel, which says let's go with the flow because the flow is where the magic happens, right? The flow is where the real truths come out and the real wisdom is gained. So I'd rather go with the flow, and if we ever hiccup or pause, then I'll go back to prompts. But I'm all for just going in flows in. So feel free to run with it.
Okay. Then in that respect, I'll answer just a quick, perhaps at this point, an understated point to your initial question, and now I'll move on to the flow piece of it and where we've gone. AI coming into my industry has affected us in two ways. I'm in product development, and a lot of that is around software engineering, coding, integrating systems. And so at a very lower end task can be pretty automated by AI systems. So instead of you putting your head down for 8 hours and writing code, which can be a pretty bricklaying process, getting AI to do the lower end work of that is pretty good. I mean, the AI system's ability to generate quality code is getting better and better. It's at a point now where it doesn't get worse from here. It only gets better. And so a lot of the redundancy and the bricklaying of code writing, it can be done by AI pretty efficiently. So that's one way that it's impacted. I would say on the other end is once products are released out into the market, there's a marketing piece of that. And the marketing piece of that is really where you see a lot of Black people. In fact, there's a lot of Black creatives, artists, creators, graphic designers, videographers. We are heavy in the marketing space, in the creative space. And so there's a powerful aspect to creating visuals and imagery when putting those things out into the world, where you have a tremendous amount of power to take what is in your head, put it down onto paper, onto screen, in pixels, and then put that out into the world. And that is a pretty powerful thing. And how AI has come into that space, beyond coding, is the generative AI piece of that in digital media. If I'm creating an image and I want to show a business person standing in the background in a suit, and I tell generative AI to create that image of me, it may generate a picture of a man. It may generate a picture of a white man. That may be its understanding of what a business person is, of what a smart person is, of what a rich person is, or what a successful person is, right? If you leave it up to the AI, it's only going to perpetuate the biases that already exist in its data model, right? So you then have to be very intentional about how you're prompting that and how you're guiding that query and to get the end result that you want. And so what happens in my space now is I've seen this in the past couple of years is where you do have to be very intentional in guiding that and making sure that, hey, can you refine that image and be more specific in the prompt that you're asking it to generate the output that you're looking for? So that ultimately, if you're working on a product that you're putting out into the world and it's supposed to represent the audience, a broad a spectrum of people, end users that are going to be interacting with that product, then you do have to be intentional to make sure that the imagery and the messaging that you put out is representative of that. And AI as a tool, and I've heard some of you talk about that, as a tool does not do that automatically. And so you really have to be intentional to help guide the tool. Use it as a tool. It doesn't dictate what gets put out, but you use it as a tool to help you get where visually and aesthetically where you want it to go. So that is just the quick answer to your question. And I wanted to make sure that that was out there. But yes, I share in a lot of the critique about AI and AI systems. I think when we talk about AI, we talk about it in terms of the bias to the end user. That is where a lot of the discussion is had. I think there are two other areas that don't get discussed as much, and I think have to be given more sunlight. The other area is the energy consumption of these AI systems and the resource demand that is on the computational power that is needed for these systems to work is very resource greedy. And the energy that it uses is not renewable energy. It's fossil fuel energy that has to power these systems. So there's environmental degradation, there's resource depletion, there's carbon emissions, there's climate impact. And when we talk about that, those areas almost always disproportionately affect marginalized communities, Black communities, poor communities. And there are long-term effects to that, asthma and the pollution and other illnesses that then result. So the energy resource demand on that AI systems require doesn't get talked about enough. I would say the third piece of that needs a lot more sunlight is the actual human involvement that is required to train these models. If you're going to train a model to mimic human behavior, it requires humans to help the AI system understand what it is to be human. And an AI system on its own doesn't know the difference between an apple and an orange. So what is happening behind the scenes, you don't hear about this as much, but what happens behind the scenes is requires a human on the other end of that to circle boxes, put squares around things, say this is an apple, this is an orange, and even more beyond that, this is an orange, this is a tangerine, this is a mandarin. It only knows that because a human at the end of the day has to give it that distinction, has to give it that knowledge. And so the human, they call this Humans in the Loop. 60 Minutes did an episode on it. Some of you may have seen it. But there's a tremendous amount of human input that goes into powering these systems and making them good. And it's hundreds of thousands of them, if not millions of them. And they are all resourced in overexploited countries where they're getting paid $2 an hour to do this, sit down, put their head down and do this for $2 an hour. And they're getting exploited. Beyond apples and oranges, they're also filtering out violent content. Part of what makes these AIs useful in the market is that there has to be a level of trust and security and responsibility in what they put forward in their generative responses. And they know they have to filter out violent content or content that could otherwise be harmful. But how does it know that? How does an AI system know what is harmful or what is dangerous or what is explicit? It knows that because at the end of the day, there are hundreds of thousands of humans sifting through these examples of violent content, graphic content. And I'm not even going to mention some of the horrific things that they see, but they have to consume this hours and hours and hours throughout the day, sometimes hours, 10 hours a day, sifting through this horrific content, people getting blown up, children being abused. It is very psychologically damaging for humans to sit back and consume that so that the algorithms understand it better, understand it the way a human would understand it and say this is violent or otherwise explicit content. And there's psychological damage that happens when you have to do that day in, day out. And so these are the areas that I think get under addressed when we talk about AI. Yes, there's bias to the end user, but there's energy consumption that has an impact on our ecosystems. And there's the human exploitation that happens on the other end of that to train the models to be better at what they do to mimic human behavior. And so I hope there's more conversation about that outside of this panel. And I thought, since we're in the critique phase, let me not forget to critique. Those are my major areas of critique for AI right now.
No, I love it, and I think it's a different picture that we haven't discussed yet. And I think that there's wisdom from every perspective, right? We just need to be open to the wisdom. This isn't about my perspective knows better than your perspective. It's hearing all the perspectives and being able to form well-rounded opinions. I know Rob just did a trip to a UAE event about AI, so I'm sure he can share some global insights to what's being heard at those roundtables and what's being talked about. As far as, I mean, if there's anywhere in the world that would know about power, it's the Middle East, right? So I'm sure they have some
Yeah,
interesting perspectives.
they do, and there certainly is much to be said about energy consumption and use of AI in that space. But I guess what was so interesting to me about this event, and this was an event sponsored by what they call D Cubed, which is Harvard Business School digital entity, which is based in Dubai. And this was a conference of a lot of business people talking about how they're using AI in all different kinds of ways. And that conversation was very different from the kind of conversation that we're having here, in that everyone seemed to be all in on AI and using AI for improving their business in whatever their business was and however they wanted to improve it. And we would get to points in the conference where we would say, oh, what about the ethical piece? Or what about the regulatory piece? And I have to tell you, DEI really didn't come up in any specific way. So one of the dangers that I'm feeling now after having attended that event was just how the business community is so, including myself, so just marching toward this bright, shiny AI future. And the risks, oh, yeah, they're there, but we'll just figure those out as we go along. And based on the conversation, what I've heard here is we're all saying to be saying there's a lot of risk, and oh my gosh, we need to manage this now. We need to put the guardrails up now. How do we do that? Oh my gosh, this is a problem. So that's very interesting to me, the kind of juxtaposition of what I heard there and what I'm experiencing here. The other thing I would add, and this is a little more related, but slightly different than anything that has been said, is we did acknowledge that the AI models are built, tuned, designed, generated with information that largely comes from males, from men. And we know from some data, and there was some sources cited, that females are, less likely to be involved in the development of AI, to use AI, to be included in AI companies, and that this represents a risk ultimately for users and for AI deployment in the future. And in fact, I'd love to tell the story about my wife when I was first showing her AI tools, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, they're so wonderful, and this is great. And when ChatGPT first launched, and finally I got her to sit down and take a look at it, and her response to me was, why would I need this? It's just interactive Wikipedia. There's nothing special here. And I get that point that she was making, right? It's like AI just kind of takes everything on the internet and just kind of pluses it up a bit. But is it really this game-changing thing that everybody thinks it is? Um, and again, I think it is, a lot bigger than that, and I think a lot of you do as well. But there is this element of maybe this is just internet 4.0. Are we putting too much emphasis into this? And again, I don't know. I just asked the question to put it out there. I'd love to hear your responses. But yeah, the business community is charging full steam ahead here, and we'll figure out the guardrails later. It's sort of my experience based on what I'm seeing. But I'd love to hear others' thoughts on that and see if I'm off in any way.
So, I mean, I will definitely open that up for everybody but I find that extremely interesting, right? I mean, it seems like they're doing what they always do, which is head first, no helmet, no seatbelt, then let's figure it out later. which is the dangerous part, especially of something that could potentially be regenerative on its own. Because if it starts building upon itself, we as human beings, we can only compute so fast. And I'm not saying that, we're looking at Terminator here, but I mean, real world scenario is we just need to understand what we're building and creating and from what perspective we're doing so. And I don't know if, business wants to look at bottom line as it always does, right? And, cutting jobs and then putting AI in place and chatbots and all these different things saves them money on their bottom line, makes shareholders happy, record highs for all these different stock markets and prices and everything else. But what's it leaving behind and who's it leaving behind? So I find it very interesting. But yeah, so Priscilla, you're first. You got the number one next to your hand. So I'm
Thank
assuming
you.
that means you're first, from what I
No,
understand at this point.
I want to respond to Rob, and I think you pointed out one issue we discussed earlier was not accounting for women or the nuances for regarding gender and how things are impacted. I think the second issue that you brought out that I alluded to was again competing perspectives with the economic market and what we're trying to do on a social level, because it seems negligent and irresponsible to craft something without evaluating the externalities. And there has been a lot of discussion regarding the potential pitfalls and concerns around AI. So to intentionally disregard that and continue to build, again, shows privilege and power. Because privilege and power allows you to continue to advance an idea with a disregard of whom it's going to impact, and then figuring out how it will be regulated. But it also is negligent from an international and a global perspective because we've incorporated AI in every capacity of life. And so globalism functions off of our ability to automate tasks, our ability um, to do more with less. And this idea that AI will replace the worker, the future generation, is partly right if we're not considering the upskilling and cross-skilling, which the World Economic Forum is talking about. So everything needs to be done in tandem, because if the machine breaks down, there has to be somebody who can come correct it or fix it when we're using the automated tellers at CVS and the supermarkets. So when there's a system glitch, it requires somebody to come in to be able to do that. And I think it's also important to note that we don't want to regulate these spaces because data is the new currency. And the way in which you're able to, you know, cull, aggregate, and acquire data at that level, which will inform machine learning, and also how we're moving forward or ways in which this can be profitable, can really only be assessed at the level if you have the resources. And then going back to looking at how I don't think AI just biases the end user. I think those who, not even just the end user, the system in and of itself, because it has its own limitations based upon its limited knowledge and its capacity, which is why they allowed people free developer licenses to play in those spaces. But it is those who are on the margins who don't even know how to use the technology in and of itself. So I think there are multiple areas that we're looking at, but it's those who are creating and what their intended goal of integrating AI. It wasn't built to be equitable. It is built to also be a strategic advantage in the corporate space. So we have to remember how it's being leveraged and ways in which it was never intended to impact those who are not in the design phases.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. As always, super powerful, like unbelievably powerful. It shakes straight through me. It's unbelievable. I feel it through my core. And based on the numbers on the screen, Zen was next because now his hand has a one next to it. So I'm trying to understand the team's technology a little bit, but as long as they keep it simple for me, then I should be okay. So Zen, you got a one there, bud. You're up.
A man that understands numbers, do we? Well,
We're
look,
keeping we're keeping them low numbers and in single digits, so we're
low
in good
numbers,
shape.
single digits. Well, look, I'm going to build upon, I think, the remarks of Rob, you, Michael, and Priscilla, and there is a dilemma that cannot be ignored in the private sector. This is where these businesses are generating these AI products and services and putting them out into the market. And that is, if you're developing these products, how you are incentivized against your bottom line, as Michael would say, is you're looking at innovation in three key dimensions. That's the desirability in the market, the viability, and then the feasibility of it. And that's what you're looking at. You're not looking at anything else. There's a fourth dimension, which is responsibility, that nonprofits look at, that social enterprises look at, organizations that are focused on corporate social responsibility in an authentic way will look at that fourth dimension of responsibility. But when we get into that fourth dimension, there's an entirely different set of questions that are beyond viability, feasibility, and desirability. You now have to start asking that there's 5 questions as a framework by which to head into that dimension. And the 5 questions are, who is this product built with? Who is it built without? Who is it built for? Who benefits and who is harmed? Those 5 questions provide you a fantastic framework by which to move through the dimension of responsibility and looking at your products. And you have to introduce that early in the product's life cycle, meaning in the ideation phase, right? Before you head into product release, before you head into growth, before you head into maturation. The ideation phase is really where you have to be asking those 5 questions. But it does provide a framework. But here's the challenge. When you start asking yourself those questions, those 5 questions, up against dimension, desirability, feasibility, and viability, those are 2 different forces. And in capitalism, you're driven by profit, you're driven by margin, you're driven by shareholder forces that are trying to tell you at all costs, we need to scale and be profitable, right? And to slow down and ask thoughtful questions that may interfere with it. And I say may, there's a theoretical argument that designing something ethically is actually successful and actually results in something that's far more scalable. There's an argument to be made there, and I am sympathetic to that argument. I would defend that argument. But the capitalist mind is not going to think about it that way. They're not incentivized to think about products that way. Think about, for example, the fire department. Fire departments that we all love and support. They are not incentivized to generate revenue. That is not their model. But think about if they were. Where are they going to get revenue from? They would only be incentivized for more fires to be out in the world, and then let's go chase these fires. That's not their incentive. There's not a revenue model there. Their service is to serve a public good. That means hopefully there's no fires that we have to go chase, right? And there's no work that we have to do. That would be ideal, right? Fantastic. But in that model, it means that the incentive structure is that of serving public good. So there's a balance that has to be achieved in the private sector when we're talking about the development of products and making those putting those products out into the market and then generating revenue behind those products and ultimately scaling those products to benefit the growth of that organization, meet its growth goals, meet its market saturation, and benefit shareholders ultimately. That is an end goal. That is an end goal, and oftentimes it's an exclusive end goal. So it is a force that us on this panel and others that are having these discussions, how do we inject the responsibility side of product development and ensure that that is not counter to and does not create unnecessary friction between the goals of an organization that ultimately wants to generate profit. And so I don't think those things have to be mutually exclusive. I think they can coexist. But unfortunately, you do have to make a persuasive argument to organizations, to corporations that are developing these products. I wish it was an argument that you didn't have to make, but pressure has to be applied. Pressure has to be applied. And but I see that as a challenge, as an ongoing challenge that's not going to disappear overnight. I think it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take many panels like this to expose where it can improve and how that can ultimately meet the promise of AI. The promise of AI is not to be destructive and harm, right? If we believe in the promise of it, then the promise of it cannot be left up to corporations. It's going to take pressure for people raising and exposing where harms are existing and how to address those and develop solutions so that it meets its promise.
No, I think that's amazing. And I know for a fact, knowing Chris, that he's right aligned with that as well. A lot of what you spoke about. And I know Rob is too, right? And I'm sure all of us here have the concept of, we understand the world needs profitability for it to exist, while also having the desire to build upon itself. You know, the issue with a socialist or a communist type situation is, what's the encouragement to create the next big thing if everybody's just getting whatever they're getting? Right? So you've got to have that entrepreneurial spirit. You've got to feed that side of it, while also building it in the equality, the equity, inclusion, truly, not the BS that's been served to date. So I know that James, you have a two next to your hand, so you're definitely next. So let's go, James. I'm just following the numbers here. And then Chris, you
Yeah,
were third. I don't know. You had a three
yeah.
for a while. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and let me say this real quick. First off, Zen, what you just shared, man, that was spot on. I'm sitting here giggling. And what's funny is I wasn't even on mute, man, but I was doing my best to keep it together because I saw a slippery slope happening in this conversation, and it was coming off nefarious. It was coming off like to one of Chris's points in our chat discussion it was created to hold people backing down. And I just want to back up for a minute. Again, I've been in industry for over 30 years, and I, it was when literally 286s and 386s came out. We had pagers, and I remember it was like, oh man, page me, or we had brick cell phones in our cars. You know what I mean? And we thought we were cool holding with two hands. So I just want to share real quick. I'm not so certain that it's negligent as much as, we've gone through phases of analysis paralysis with big data. So I made a few notes here, and we had to transition from aim and never fire because we gained access to data so fast we didn't know what to use when to right the ship. So I did 10 years in the Navy, so you're gonna hear some sailor analogies in here. So we went out and we built dashboards with KPIs, and we gave leaders all across the world access to information, but we flooded them with so much information they had no idea what to use when. Then we transitioned to from competitive advantage with data to strategic advantage, and we made it a financial or a monetary advantage where we want to lock it down. It went from public and open source to private. Then we said, okay, fail fast, learn, change. And that stuck in the agile mentality, like fail fast, get it out there. So you have to think about how these developers came to be. So I wanted to remind everybody that the developers are creators. Creators don't usually respond to should it be done. They respond to can it be done? Right. So a lot of times when you have, like I'm looking at Zen, he's talking about product development. A lot of times you'll have the product owner or the business come directly to the developers and say, can it be done? Not should it be done? And so you do have to get somebody, if it's not the same organization who's actually building AI, somebody must be responsible. And I think it's us, right? I think it's the people like us saying things like, okay, it's here now. What do we do? How do we balance this awesome computing power with the fact that bias has been baked in some cases, right? Um, Not all bias is bad, but these biases, is it unconscious bias? Is it malicious? What are the harms that are being created? How do we offset it? Can we right set it? What can we do? Are we being the sky is falling and it's not a big deal because we can fix it like Priscilla said, because the human has to come back in anyway when it breaks. And this is considered a broken system now, and we need to fix it and write it and right the ship in the next revision of AI. So I just wanted to put out there that I'm not saying throw out the baby with the bathwater. AI is here to stay in some form or fashion. We do need to be more responsible with how we utilize it, on how we hire our people, how we use AI in any capacity that we want to do this and back off and say, I let the system make the decision. Because again, I saw ChatGPT say things like compassion, gut instinct, feelings, sadness, all the emotions that humans bring to the table, it acknowledged that AI could not do. So when you add that in the fact that AI is being used heavily in human resources, which has now been commoditized and outsourced, we have to be careful. So I'll just close with that on my point. But I just wanted to say we have to be really careful with where we're using AI and the fact that we're still in the driver's seat.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it, and I love those insights. And I agree. I mean, look, AI can't replace humans unless humans decide to allow it to replace them. And that's how I feel about it, right? And technology is always an amplifier. Let's never forget this. Technology doesn't replace anything. It's just an amplifier. So whatever we put into it is just going to be amplified. The issue is now if it becomes regenerative, then it's a little bit different of an amplifier. And because of the speed that it processes, that also shifts how it can impact humanity. And if it goes into these industries and areas that impact human capacity, humanity itself, if it goes into energy, if it goes into healthcare, if it goes into all these places, it can have that direct influence on our lives and make decisions of who gets care first, who's priority on donor lists. These are things that, and that's healthcare, right? Then you go into the financial capacity. I mean, it's proven that there's always been the racism and the biases. And I mean, I don't think women could even get checking accounts in the 70s, right? Like, I mean, and that's, and then we didn't even go to the racist side, right? We're just talking about the gender side. So, like, there's all these components. But when you start putting AI in the middle of it, that's where I get concerned. Because if you're building on top of the foundation, and yes, Priscilla is brilliant and her experience is unbelievable, we need more perspectives at the table. But when you have developers, and let's not pretend, right? Like, I mean, here's a good stereotype, right? They're the 17-year-old pimple-faced kids drinking 17 monsters a night, spitting out this code, right? But what do they know about the real world? What experience do they have? And these are the people building these things. And then you see these funds, these venture funds, throwing billions, literally billions of dollars. You can cure hunger, you can cure illnesses, you can cure homelessness, you can give away buildings, you can give away sports teams, you can hand stuff away for the amount of money that they're throwing into AI. But for some reason, again, we're prioritizing technology over humans, which I know Lindsay, one of the guests here, has brought up many times. And Lindsay's had amazing insights. So anyone, we're going to let Chris go next because he's got a 2 next to his hand. And I think Zen still has the 1 up from before. So I don't know how to take it down. I don't know if he knows how to take it down, but he's keeping his place first in line. So more power to Zen. I appreciate and respect that. But if anybody in the audience has questions, you can come on screen, but let's get Chris to comment first, and then you can either come on screen, put your video on, or type in the chat box or whatever is more convenient for whoever. But I would love to get more interaction because I love the direction that this is going right now. Chris, I know you have valuable information to add here, especially in healthcare and with everything that everybody's been discussing. I just know you personally, and I know your ambitions and how you want to shift humanity.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, we need to define what type of AI we're talking about. Are we talking about generative AI? Are we talking about computer vision? Are we talking about neural networks? Because we're talking about a lot of different things here when we're talking about AI. For the most part, it sounds like everybody here is talking about generative for the most part, which is just your ability to talk through ChatGPT, generate images and stuff like that. And the term bias in those. I think we need to just really reframe AI, I think, first and foremost, and just stop calling it intelligent. Artificial intelligence is just a marketing term. And so the first thing we need to do to fix this problem is to just take the word intelligence out of it completely. So stop calling it intelligent. It's not. It's a mimic machine. So let's just call it what it is. And in terms of what it's going to amplify, as Michael likes to put it, or you know, I would use the term, it's just like it's just going to fractionally explode in terms of how quickly these messages or ideas can get generated. It's going to be like how essentially you go from a Nintendo used to be 8-bit to 16-bit to 32. So it's going to get faster. As it gets faster, it's going to get doubly as good. So just think of it expanding in that regard. So as each iteration goes on, it's going to get that much stronger. And the thing to worry about with bias is the way they train it is they just train it on everything that's human knowledge already. So all human knowledge, like, so every piece of literature we've ever written, everything we've done, that's how they train the models, right? And they just used it training ones and zeros. So all it knows how to do is replicate everything we've digitized. So all the biases that are in there are just whatever biases exist in human nature. And when we try to remove that bias from it, even when we try our hardest to remove bias from AI in any way, shape, or form, we can't, because we've discovered that we actually have subconscious and unconscious biases. So it's really, really, it's almost impossible to remove it from artificial intelligence altogether. It's next to impossible. And so what we really need to do is remarket it, relabel it, explain what it is a lot better. Maybe artificial general intelligence, which is what everybody thinks of when they hear AI, and that would be something that can reason like an actual human being. We haven't created anything near that, nothing, not even close. We've created an illusion, essentially. So let's reframe the way we talk about artificial intelligence first and foremost, and then we could start addressing what we mean by bias, what they are, and how we can eliminate them.
Thank you, Chris, for pointing those facts out and that stuff out, because I think we need to understand that at a deeper level as well. I know that David in the audience has had his hand raised, and I know that he did it previously too. Zen, are you okay waiting to see what David asks? David, I don't know how to do this. I wish I could lie to you and tell you I did, but I have no clue.
Don't worry, Michael.
So
I got you. I got you covered.
if I
Davida,
think
you
if
can
you
go ahead.
unmute,
Yeah, they can
yeah, if
unmute.
you
They just
unmute,
can't do their
yeah.
cameras. So you all can unmute as you all go ahead. And we can start with yes, Davida. And then we will go to Lindsay.
Yeah, and then we'll go back to Zen
Okay.
again.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for having me. I could have turned on my video, but it's past 12 a.m. and I'm already in my sleep dress, so please indulge me. I'm communicating you from Nigeria, West Africa. We love to say we are the giants of Africa, but then pardon us. every country is the giant of Africa. Okay. I have interest in talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I work as HR and I work for a multinational. So diversity, equity, and inclusion for me, it's not just a topic, but it's also a business strategy. Every day, as the world changes and as the business landscape change, we see the role diversity and inclusion plays, and we also see the challenges it poses. And I'll be speaking from both ends, the opportunities, but the undeniable challenges. Please pardon me because some of the things I may be saying shouldn't look like it's without prejudice to anything anyone has said before, but it's just my opinion. So first of all, we have the certain groups feel they are being marginalized against, and I have several questions. Why do we think we are being marginalized? In fact, why are we talking about diversity and inclusion regarding artificial intelligence? Why is this topic not about dance and about hip hop? Because Africans have done so well, and permit me, I'll be talking so much about Africans, Black Africans particularly. We've been very hardworking in the entertainment sector. So you have the likes of Jay-Z, Beyonce, Burna Boy, who's actually Nigerian. And there's no need to have people sit down to talk about how we could be included. Inclusivity is not a topic around that subject, because for real, why that is not a topic is because we've been hardworking in that area. Am I saying we've not been hardworking in tech? Not exactly, but maybe we've not shown enough interest for ourselves. It's easy for us to accuse our colonial masters, and yes, they did us so much, but much more than that, we must start to look inwards, because the things that cause this divide around diversity, inclusiveness, around marginalization starts with the persons themselves. The question is, how many African countries have started discussing artificial intelligence within themselves? How many African countries have integrated these things in their local educational curriculum? What are we doing about it? We have footballs, we have so much interest around footballs, we have our children going to dance classes, we have interest in entertainment, and we're not giving the same interest in technology. And tomorrow we'll come out and say our colonial masters are depriving us from our opportunities. The truth is, we have deprived ourselves by not showing interest in technology. We don't just want to do it first. And I'm not generalizing the set, because I know there are people who have genuine interest. But look at the largest sample in the group. Now, I was raised in a state called Benue State in Nigeria, and I'm going to tell you one of the things, one of the challenges that made one of the biggest company in that state leave the state. So you have a rice business. This business is called Olam Farms. It employs over 3,000 persons. And now you have a chief in that locality, and the chief says, you must employ 500 of my guys. Trust me, the HR in that organization went through hell. They employ these guys and they don't work. And in fact, they'll tell it to your face that I'm not going to work because I know I have a slot. Our chief says you must employ 500 of us. So why should I even work? Whether you like it or not, I have a slot here and you can't do business here because you have to employ me. That was the basis for which Olam Nigeria left Benue State, and they're currently operating in Ogun State. Now, Benue State has lost that capacity for business. I'm saying this to say that first, as Africans, or as every other group that is underrepresented, we should ask ourselves, what role are we taking in ensuring that we are included? Because sometimes it's easy for us to just feel these people did us bad and they are just marginalizing us. Well, have we actually taken the practical steps? Do we actually deserve what we're asking for? And are we intentionally executing the attitude of people who should not be marginalized? I mean, we come from homes where we have siblings and children, and even as parents, sometimes we do not intend to marginalize or to discriminate amongst our children, but one child shows a better interest in a particular thing, and it's easier for the parent to invest in that child more. So I want to start by saying Africans must start by putting themselves on the map for technology. And that way it is easier to get ourselves involved. The funds we're talking about would come if we're doing exceptionally well, because it is very difficult to fight excellence. If we do not take this approach, a time will come when all will be crybabies. We'll just be asking for inclusivity without the efficiency to be included. So that even if you include some of us who have nothing to offer, and this is not just for Africans, these are for other underrepresented groups like some Muslim communities and the likes. So secondly, I want to say that we are our problem. How many African communities understand unity? Over here in Nigeria, you still have intertribal wars, religious wars, we still have political issues, we still have people embezzling funds, and trust me, such society cannot thrive. Nobody's going to be willing to include you in whatever they are doing when you still have politicians that spend over $300 million in repairing a road that shouldn't cost up to $100. When we are not yet true to ourselves. So my call today is to say that we must start from within. We must resolve our intertribal clashes. We must resolve our political issues. And we must see how for every sector we want to be recognized in, we must see how we integrate these things within our community for ourselves. Just the way we have football academy across Africa, we should have tech academy, we should have AI academy, we should integrate AI in our curriculum. if we start building capacities, then it will be easier for the world over to integrate us. Something sad happened a few months ago with the pageantry, where a Nigerian was not able to contest somewhere in South Africa for so many reasons. And at the end of it, it was because this person is not my nationality. And the question is, if Africans can be this divided amongst themselves and could be sentimental to the point of depriving someone from participating in a pageantry because she's not from my country, even though she's lived in that country for more than 23 years, then how do you expect the world over to take us serious? So we've not yet understood diversity within ourselves. So why should the world take us serious? So it's time for us to go home, improve in our diligence, and ensure that we solve our problems right in our homes before we point fingers on our colonial masters. That's not to say they may not have done something bad, but I know no colonial master is currently the president of any Nigerian, of any African country, yet we still have lots of mess going on. Thank you for now.
Thank you for that
you,
insight.
Tavita.
I don't know how to respond truly. I don't. I don't experience it. I have zero personal experience from it. I'll never pretend that I do, or even have a comprehension level of what it is like to be in that space or that position. My personal perspective with anything that's going on around me is to heal oneself first and reflect it outward, because our perception of things change as we shift. And I understand that when you're looking at a meshment of reasons and all these different things, and it's not only in Nigeria and only the tribal stuff and only that, because you also have money being funneled from around the world, knowing that Africa in the next 30 years is going to be the youth and power and, you know, population center of the planet, right? And you have China funneling money in the US and all these corporations funneling money in to all over Africa. Yes, manipulating, taking advantage of, and doing what they do best, which is keep their costs down. So there's so many multi layers to this situation. And the only thing I know what to do is take it one person at a time on an individual basis, go through, these different things. And I understand that AI is not in the education system there, but it's truly not here either in the US. And I understand that when the world looks at the US, there's this perception that we have our shit together. I promise, excuse my language, but I promise you, we have no clue. We have no idea. Is it more readily available? Yes. Are we do we have easier access? Yes. Do we have it available to at our fingertips that we can set it up? Yes. Is it implemented in a way that benefits our children here? Not at all. So there's many perspectives to look at, and I would encourage you just to keep being you. And I really appreciate your input, and I love learning about your perspective because I have no clue what that's like. And Chris, I know your hand's up, but if you can bear with me one more second, I want to let Lindsay chime in her questions because she was typing a lot in the chat window. You can leave the hand up and just go next. That's fine. Lindsay, I'd love to hear from you because you've been so interactive this whole time with typing.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this panel. I really appreciate you guys. I'm actually not in tech, so I want to I want to kind of give you a quick introduction so you know who you're talking to. I'd have my video on, but for some reason it doesn't like me right now. And then I know that's not made better by the fact that I just said I'm not in tech, so I apologize. And so I was introduced to DEI kind of like as a concept because I'm an educator. And so, going to I have a very similar probably experience to Chris, like a very isolated, secluded childhood. And going to college and teaching in inner city Title I schools. And I started my DEI journey there. And so I was fortunate enough to have my very first job out of college, be at a district who was using the amazing work of Glenn Singleton and his courageous conversations about race. And once I had kiddos, I stopped teaching. I still continued my own learning with DEI. I've only ever worked in Title I schools. And in the last few years, I've been working with my school and my school district that my kiddos go to, developing DEI protocol for parent organizations, and then working with our local government as an advisory board to the government. And so I am actually just trying to start exploring and dip my toes into the tech world and into the private sector, because I've only ever done this in the public sector, or the public sector, sorry. And so I think just one thing, being a person who's centered within the humanities, is this isn't more of a question, I guess it's more feedback, but this panel is 6 people and then the attendees are only 7. I would have also appreciated if there was a little bit of time given to attendees, so that we all kind of have that open space, so that you guys as panelists can have kind of that, let's put some faces, names, who are we talking to, where are we all from, like what can we offer into this conversation. But I think the pieces that I was connecting the most with was a lot of the stuff that Priscilla was saying. Essentially, like, AI has a bias problem because as people we have a bias problem, and I think Chris, you were alluding to this as well. And so it's not AI. AI is a symptom of our disease. And so I think that I'm again, like I said, I'm from the public sector. I'm more of a humanities person, but to me, through my journey, I believe DEI work is a humanities work. It is about people. And I have a husband who is in the tech industry, and that's a hard science. And so when you have people with hard science brains trying to do soft science things without having the guidance of people who have, as you kind of put it, that that soft skill, that ability to have that social emotional balance, when you don't have those things in place and you don't have leadership at any of these places willing to actually fundamentally change their systems in a DEI manner, you will not succeed at DEI. It just won't happen. And so my own plight here is like my employment gap and trying to get in the door. And I know, like, we have some other women here who have talked about these things, but those are things that even just, I'm like looking at this panel and it's like majority men. Like, where are the women here? Because like us in tech, we don't exist. I mean, I just saw something from an organization who does DEI in tech, and the places that they work with saw an 8-point decrease in women working in tech. And so they met all of their other DEI goals. And so, when we talk about AI and all these young men programming AI, you're talking about young men with their monsters programming in AI. Well, where are the women? And like I'm just going to go into this tech piece again. Like, we have a lot of companies moving away from remote work. And I mean, I don't have the data, but from experience, from the things that I've gathered, a lot of women are leaving tech because they can't work from home. They can't work remotely, and they carry the mental burden at the home. And so when we don't acknowledge that these things are happening before we jump to what is the problem with AI, if we are not truly and fundamentally fixing the base of this system, like, we're never going to get to a system where AI is not biased. So I like comparing it to a tree, right? So to me, racism, let's say, or bias, it all stems from this diseased tree, right? And so we will have this bias in AI, and it's all because our tree is diseased. These roots need to be treated. So until we can start cutting off these limbs, but these disease roots are going to keep pushing up these new branches.
I didn't silence her. If that makes anybody other than me feel better about my life, I did not silence her. I'm not sure what happened.
Oh, sorry. Where did it cut me off?
No, she's good. No, you're good, Lindsay. Go
We can
ahead.
still hear her,
No,
Michael.
No,
I can
yeah,
still
it
hear
didn't
her.
cut off on my end. I heard everything.
Okay.
No, I heard everything.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am, go ahead.
So yeah, so for me, all of this is, think of us as a tree, right? And so our disease is our bias, our roots. And until we treat that tree, until we treat that damage, until we fix those roots, no matter what attempts we have at cutting off those branches of trying to decrease bias in AI, decrease bias by hiring diverse workforces, until we actually treat, like you guys were all saying, treat that root, treat ourselves, and then build this system where that tree can thrive, we are going to continue to find bias in all the things that we create. So that's just, I appreciate so much, just all of you, like hearing the different perspectives of where you're seeing this, where you are in your journeys, and like understanding that AI is a human issue, not a coding issue, right? Like, so I really appreciate this. It actually, it makes me feel good about moving into like a tech space, just because I was worried that this stuff would potentially be missing. And so I was trying to find places that would really, really like center equity work. And so I appreciate you guys putting this on, and thank you. So sorry, I didn't mean to talk that long.
No, Lindsay,
I
thank
just
you
want to
so
touch in
much. Oh,
real
sorry.
quick,
Go ahead,
Michael.
Ayana.
No, you're good. I just want to jump in. Please excuse me. I sound like a dying cat. My God. Um, I just want to say, listen, this sickness up in Boston is not for the weak. Okay, I don't know who else lives up north, but that snow, the cold, no, thank you. One thing I will say, Lindsay, I definitely really do appreciate it. One educator to another, tech isn't talked about enough in education. As a young woman of color, too, having come up where AI was in the emergence of me coming through college, I didn't use AI for papers. I didn't use it for outlines. So when it came out to me after I graduated school, I was kind of like, dang, where was this? When I was in school, it could have been helpful. But I do want to say, I do want to touch on it too. Diversity, equity, inclusion is really the fundamentals of policy, practice, and approach. And what all of you have talked about, and really addresses the importance of really discussing that. And like we talked about, the human disease of our own bias, our own subconscious bias, where we still aren't necessarily understanding the fundamentals of intersectionality, which is not a social phenomenon, but a matter of critical and analytical thinking. Nothing is made up of one thing, and neither are you. So, to understand your gender, your race, your education, your occupation, your disability, all of those things play a role. So, to think, like you said, Lindsay, that or the artificial technology, not the intelligence, like you said, Chris, but the technology is not going to capture all of that. So, I think one of the things that, especially that, and I will shift it back to you all, but something I want to know is, though we cannot capture that, what does the development process look like in developing that ability to be culturally competent, to be competent of these varying identities and perspectives? Because you can't get everything, but there is still room to try. And there is still an attempt. And so maybe I'm sure you all have talked about it, but it is something. And for education, that is extremely important. And with tech, we're seeing now controversies of students using the AI to create the outlines to do this, but then they're getting, what's the word, reprimanded for plagiarism, because then there are students who do use it for who do plagiarize papers and stuff, but then there are people who do use it to explore the ideas, to really dive more into these ideas and perspectives. So, Lindsay, I'm right there with you, because I don't know really much, and I'm the one who set up this meeting. So for y'all, this is already a work in progress for me. So I appreciate you all bearing with me with that. But I do think it's important, especially for education, because that too is education. But technology also is the power of revealing. And I think that's extremely important. I want to pivot that conversation also, because everything that has been created in a technological way has revealed something else. AI is now also a revelation to whatever answers, whatever ideas, perspectives, histories, things that we're thinking of, but it still can't encompass everything. So I just wanted to say that, and I will make it brief, because I know, Chris, you have to get to your point too, and Zen definitely, because you've been waiting a long time. But I did just want to say that, because AI isn't just in the tech industry; it's in finance, it's in everything. Nobody's exempt from being a part of this development process. because if it's supposed to be reflective of humans or the humanistic approach, but it's void of the human interaction, I think that's something extremely important that we do have to discuss more. And I do hope we have this panel again, because I do want it to be a series of conversations, because there isn't just one conversation about this. I believe that digital innovation, digital equity, automation equity, it's all the future. And with, with Project 2025 and everything, we also now have to discuss what our lives are going to look like in that new stage, in that new spot, in this new era. And technology is going to be at that forefront also. So I'm done talking for real now. You go ahead, Michael. So sorry. And Zen and Chris, please.
Thank you, Ayana. I'm really hoping that you feel better soon. Um, and Lindsay, just to address the thing that you said real quick, and then I'll move on to Chris and Zen. One of the main reasons I wanted to become part of SDIG, and then we'll have our closing remarks from Dr. Joseph. One of the main reasons I wanted to become a part of SDIG is not only do I believe in their mission, but I also know the work that I do and the work that I've created and been so blessed to have lived through, the programs that I've developed and everything that I've created around individuals healing a much larger scale. And it's about healing each individual and taking the science minds and helping them to tap into their emotions and all those different things. So it's one of the main reasons I was so motivated and excited to become a part of SDIG, is because I see the bigger overall need to reach that unconditional self-love, that objectivity space, and all those different things that humanity needs to strive for to really make the impact in the future that we can make. And this is a long-term conversation, because none of these things are happening tomorrow. This is what's going to happen the next 50, 100, 150, 200 years. This is the industrial revolution, just at a whole different pace and in a whole different way. This is going to change how humanity operates in every industry. I mean, if you really think about it, 150 years ago, we just started having steam engines, right? Like, I mean, this is, we think that it's this huge period of time and that we've been this established, civilized society, which is arguable on many levels to begin with, right? So, conception that, we're much more grandiose than we really are as humans. So, Chris, I'm going to pass it over to you. Then we'll go to Zen, and then we'll go to Dr. Joseph for, I guess, closing remarks, because we're wrapping this up.
All right, yeah, so I had to actually type it out just because sometimes I lose my thoughts and I didn't want to lose this one. So beyond DEI, we also need diversity of thought, first and foremost. Like, that's another huge thing that needs to be included in this conversation always. And the other thing is, we also, we're always coming at this from a problem angle, right? And if you could just shift the paradigm a little bit and take every problem and look at it as an opportunity, guys, this is just a computer program, which means you can learn it and use it the same way that you believe it's being used against you. And it's just a tool, right? All these technologies, they're tools. So if you learn them, if you learn how to develop them, if you learn, all these courses that are available online, people have never made it easier for anybody in the world. This is the knowledge creation economy. All you have to do is you got to get a team of IT developers, data scientists together, and somebody who's a visionary with knowledge, and you can create LLMs, figure out how to do all these bot programs, doing all this stuff yourselves. It's incredibly easy. You can make an economy anywhere you are. That's actually kind of what my organization is going to be doing. So, I mean, if you guys want to jump on board and hop in, I'm looking for board members who are of diverse backgrounds and equity and thought. So I'm standing up the organization in real time. So I'm happy to talk to you guys offline if anybody's interested. I'm talking to Michael about it myself. So look, this is something that's live, running in real time, and I'm standing up in 2025. So let's keep the conversation going. I'm looking for people who are ready to take action steps. So whoever has good business plans, let's start talking.
Thank you, Chris. And as you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you're building. What I will say is, and no offense against any other person at this roundtable, including myself, but every table needs a Priscilla. I think we'll all
Yeah,
agree.
of course.
That woman is a powerhouse. Her experience comes through.
Yeah.
My vote is for her every day of the week. I'd vote her for president tomorrow. Like, I'm all in. Like, whatever it is. Like, the passion and the wisdom that she carries is what this world needs. And then we just need to find the diverse backgrounds to fill that passion and that wisdom, right? The problem is finding those full packages, which I'm not sure they're anywhere near the top of what we call society today. But anyway, on that note, I'll move on to Zen, and then we'll go to Dr. Joseph for closing remarks as we come to the end of this very interesting roundtable. Went better than I thought it would, so that's impressive.
Wonderful. No, there's a lot of good conversation, and quickly, I want to get to Davita's point. I think she raised a pretty interesting one, perspective coming from Nigeria. To Lindsay's point, I think there's a short response to that in terms of representation. Diversity in development, diversity in organizations is not simply an altruistic moral imperative. Strategically, it's good business practice. More diverse teams outperform consistently those that are not diverse. And so strategically, it's not so much of us having to beg, kick, and scream for these organizations to do the right thing. If they really want to be strategic and get an advantage on the competition, introduce more diverse teams, more competent, diverse teams with more perspective. So there's that side of it. Davita mentioned about some of the strifes within the homeland, right? So we're talking, she's from Nigeria. I often I laugh, and then immediately after I laugh, I get heartbroken when you hear arguments about who makes the best jollof rice. Dr. Joseph knows. Who makes the best jollof? Is it Nigeria? Is it Ghana? And at the surface level, there's a tremendous amount of levity and humor and innocence in that. But on the other side of that, I get really concerned that at the end of the day, what I hope for Africa is that Africa does become united. We say it's a giant. It is a giant, and that giant is going to stand up when Africa gets united. And we see there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of promise in that direction. We see the Sahel states. We see a lot of the countries around there really understanding the impact of what colonialism has done and how to correct course. And so Davita talks about that a little bit. She talks about the governments and the people leading those governments, leading those states, and how they can be agents for change. And it's complicated. It does get, there's a piece of it that's complicated, but it's not at the same time, right? It's very simple what's happening in Africa. The need that she speaks about in terms of technology, doing for ourselves, creating for ourselves, is one that there's a tremendous amount of chorus around. Even here in the United States, you hear about when there's complaints about social media platforms, and what you hear from the Black community in that space is, we need our own platform. We need our own platform. We need our own platform. It is a very common theme in the Black diaspora for us to create for ourselves and not have to ask to be included, not have to be asked to be brought to the table, not having to be asked to be brought to the dance, but to start to create for ourselves. And so there is, I can tell you specifically, so this is a bit anecdotal, what we are doing, to Davita's point. We are working in Kakuma refugee camp specifically. And we've stood up a tech center hub. AREL is the organization. We've stood up a tech center hub that is specifically, intentionally focused on training Africans on these technologies and get them competent, get them proficient, and get them in the space of creating and designing and being part of the creation and development ecosystem by learning this space. And so we have courses that train them up. They get certified. They get ongoing coaching and mentorship. And it's part of that recognition that she talks about, where we have to be part of what is being developed, not just on the receiving end of that. We have to be creating. We have to be developing systems. And so that is huge. But what you're going to notice, and what I've noticed in those spaces, is certainly this is not separate and apart from some of the challenges that Africa faces. We have in that camp, we have African refugees from Sudan, South Sudan. We have them from Somalia. We have them from Congo, and other places throughout the continent. And these places are being decimated by neocolonialism and multinational corporations and oligarchs who are exploiting those places. And so there's one side of this that is, yes, we have to figure out how we can empower ourselves through knowledge. Knowledge is the great equalizer. Education is the great liberator. There's a piece of that that actually has to happen. The other side of that is that there is a boot on the neck that has to be removed. And that boot on the neck is there. And we can't ignore that it's there. And we have a right to say that boot should be removed. We have a right to tell that person wearing that boot to get off the neck. And so it's a two-pronged approach to say that, yes, we're going to do for ourselves. We're going to try to do for ourselves. We're going to educate. We're going to bridge the digital divide and form partnerships. It's a lot of what Arella is doing, what Benevola is doing, what Dr. Joseph is doing with SDIG, forming the partnerships and alliances to empower, self-empower. And on the other side of that, recognize that there are some formidable forces nonetheless, where we still have to continue to apply pressure to create the necessary space for us to then realize true liberation and creativity, and become part of not just the recipients and consumers of technology, but those that are actually creating it. And so there are a lot of solutions to some of these problems. There's so much limited time here, and I know we're out of time here, and we didn't get enough to talk about some of the solutions, but there are solutions to some of these problems. I'll throw out a couple of bullet points, and then I'm going to hand it over so that we can wrap up here. But explainable AI is an emerging space in AI development, where they call it XAI. So if you Google that term, you can learn a lot more about it, where it exposes the logic behind the decisions that are being made in AI. And this is helpful both to the end user, one, to develop trust in the decision that's being made, but also to the developers who are on the other side trying to understand the logic behind how it arrived to that end decision. A lot of the complexity that exists in AI happens in these black boxes that nobody really understands. Even the people that develop it do not understand what is in that black box ultimately. So explainable AI, you're going to see more conversation around explainable AI being part of a development mechanism for how we, as both end users and the developers, understand how AI is generating the responses it's generating. The other piece is that because AI is simply perpetuating biases that already exist in our communities, then one way to address that is by developing synthetic data models, right? There's going to be a lot of gap in terms of what the data set is and what it pulls from in terms of how AI and large language learning models synthesize that data. And one way to address that gap is to develop synthetic models, to inject new data sets that represent realistic characteristics of real world demographics, because the system only has what it has. So how do you adjust those gaps? And so you're going to hear a lot more about synthetic data modeling to address some of those gaps, to make sure that what is being synthesized and ultimately produced as an answer, as an output, is more balanced. But it's not going to be more balanced unless we address the gaps in the data set. So synthetic data modeling is, you're going to hear a lot more about that. So I just wanted to throw out some of the solutions to some of these problems and how we can start to explore those a little bit more, talk about them a little bit more. But the promise of AI is there, but we have to be a lot more intentional, and we have to be a lot more critical. And these conversations are helping us do that. And then also on top of the critique is to think about solutions that don't just give us incomplete solutions, but more holistic solutions to the challenges that we're faced by AI. So I love the discussion. I appreciate everyone. I find it maybe a little bit of an honor to get the last word here from the panel. But Dr. Joseph, thank you. Thank you for having us all here on this panel to talk about a very important topic.